7:02. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We're working on getting the speakers working, so I'll use my loud teacher voice here. We'll go ahead and begin with the pledge, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first roll call. Bonnie Benz, here. Sherry Bowman, here. Mercedes Evans, here. Michelle Forbes, here. Jennifer Hoover, here. Melissa Packer, here. Emily Smith, here. Okay, we are at the first period of public comment now. If you have any comments, please come up to the microphone, which probably is working, and state your name and address, and if you were able to limit your comments to 3 minutes, that would be appreciated.
Hello. Dan Daly, 817 County Glen Drive. We have a big problem. Lantern flies are huge. And it doesn't, we had none last year at our house. This year we have so many, and I've been on a kick of getting people in the neighborhood to get tape on the trees. And we have to keep replacing tape. There's just so many, and each one lays 50 to 30 eggs per female. And it's not going to get any better anytime soon. And I'm really worried about it. And something needs to be done. I can only do my neighborhood, but there's got to be something as a town come together and do something, because this is a big problem. And I worry about the trees. I worry about these things are just nasty, and it's not going to get any better. So if we do nothing, we have a little window now because the bugs are at the nymph stage, and once they get to the flying stage, and they're bigger and harder to kill. It's going to be a problem when we get to that point. Because then we have to find the eggs, and we'll have to do that eventually, because that's how you really eradicate these things, by killing the eggs. But I'm killing so many, and my neighbors are, and it's just like, I feel like we're like holding, this night trying to water. Everyone's got to do something. And if they don't, then it's just going to be a bigger problem. And I'm really concerned for so many reasons. And I've never seen anything like this before. Gypsy, we've been through a lot. I'm 60 years old, and I've seen there a lot. This just blows me away. So I just urge the council to do something as a community. We can't sit back and watch this happen and do nothing, because it's just next year, you do the math. The math is astronomically going to be a big problem. And we all can do something. And the thing is, everyone's got to do something, not just one person, not just our little neighborhood, but it has to be an aggregate community-wide thing. I don't want to, I love soccer, I love football, and I just can't imagine what those fields are going to be like, come fall with all those bugs flying around. I was at Mechanicsburg. I watched my daughter's field hockey game, and it was disgusting. There were so many bugs that were there. It was nauseating. And I called the town, and I said, "Do you have any? No, we can't do it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" So it's like everyone's trying to put the blame on someone else, but we need to do something as a community, because I'm just worried about situation. So I just wanted to call. I would be remorse not to. I do it on Facebook, but I wanted to do it in person because I wanted to show I'm serious about this, and you guys should be serious too, because this is something you've never seen before in my lifetime. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
My name is Bob Benora, 14 South 24th Street. I have a question regarding easement. Is the borough's easement different from the state's definition of easement? That's one. And two, there's a 1,500 square foot piece of property behind my house. It's not deeded to me. It's abandoned. It's collecting everything. Mosquitoes, lantern flies, ticks, and no one knows what to do with it. No one wants to touch it. No one wants to take the responsibility of adding it to their estate because of the taxes. So we need to have it addressed. We need to have someone come out and define what is the property line, who takes care of what. That's my beef right
Bob Beal, 40 North 27th Street. Just want to say that in a few minutes there's going to be a presentation about the Congoin Greenway. And I just want to say that this project has kind of been a long time coming. A lot of Campbell residents have worked pretty hard on initiating the idea, working with the state, finding funding, finding a consultant, getting this report done. So I'll let Peter do the presentation and give you all the details. But thanks for the borough's kind of support through this whole process. I appreciate consideration of the project. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no other announcements, the next item on the agenda is President's announcements. I would just like to share that we met in executive session at 6 p.m. this evening to discuss the Serluco land use appeal, or the potential of settling the Serluco land use appeal. And would you like to give anything?
Sure. As you all may know, recently the legislature passed legislation to stop tolling on the bridges that were part of the public-private partnership that the borough and its neighbors have been litigating against. The legislation was signed by Governor Wolf on Monday. We are working with our friends out in South Fayette, on the western part of the state, who are also litigating this, to determine our next steps as far as the litigation goes. But as it stands now, the governor signed legislation essentially stopping the tolling of I-83.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
A second? Okay, very good. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved, and we will move on to the manager's report.
Good evening. I'm going to talk even louder if I can. Sorry about the microphones. We're working on several grants. We've submitted a grant application to the Cumberland County Recovery Fund that we're requesting funds near $1.7 million for police, fire, and public works department radios that would upgrade to the county system. That's the new system that's coming in, as well as for sanitary sewer infrastructure improvements. So pretty flashy stuff, but super important, and we're hoping that we get some of that funding from the county. We also recently learned that we have been preliminarily awarded $100,000 to install ADA compliant curb ramps. We would do that in advance of our next paving project. So what we've understood from that program, which is through the Cumberland County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, is that we are eligible for ADA compliant ramp funds even in neighborhoods that wouldn't otherwise be eligible for those funds. So we would like to get into a habit of applying for those in advance of each paving project. It doesn't pay for all the ramps, but it at least pays for some. I did want to announce again, we do have the group of kids, we're calling the My Work Crew, and it's called the My Work program, which is through the Pennsylvania Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. These are special needs kids, adults, young adults, I'll say, who are getting real job experience. They're being paid for their work, and they're helping our public works crew primarily. They did paint the graffiti in the underpasses. Those kids did that. So, and we have cameras now, so no one else will ever paint them again. Finally, I did want to reiterate, everyone has a flyer in the packet. If you don't have a flyer, if you haven't seen this flyer, please talk to me. I'll give you 5. We're having the Stormfest event where you can come and learn about all the kinds of environmental concerns that we're talking about all the time, primarily water quality, but also about energy efficiency, the importance of using bicycle for transportation. And we have almost 40 presenters that are coming in addition to all the borough presentations that we'll be having. So it's food trucks also, so bring a little bit of money for that, but everything else is free. We have kids activities, adult activities, and several giveaways thanks to our sponsors, which you can see on our website. And that's my report.
Thank you, sir. The reports of committees and board liaisons, public safety.
All right, let's get started with the mayor's report.
All right. The moment everybody's been waiting for here, I think. Tonight we have several very special guests with us. We have our school resource officer, Joe Capers. I don't know if council met Joe before, but Joe is here, his wife Jen. We have Elaine Fagan from the Honor 25 Foundation. Can you put it on? So this has been a while in the making, but we went through the approval process with council and the school district, and we have our new school community engagement dog. This is Detective Gibbs. He is Joe's newest partner. This is very exciting. He's better looking than Joe, actually. And this was all made possible by the generous donation from Elaine Fagan and her Honor 25 Foundation. She made this possible. And Elaine, can you say a few words?
Yes, and I will start out by saying if I get emotional, I apologize. I'm going to do my best not to cry. I don't know, some of you, I know there are several of you in the room that know the backstory behind Honor 25. But in 2019, my youngest son, Jonathan, passed unexpectedly from anaphylactic shock. And he was a week away from heading to Westchester University. And it was obviously a huge loss to our family, but since his passing, I have discovered that it was a very large loss to the community as a whole. My son made a significant impact on a lot of the students and on more people in the community than I recognized or knew about. I'm proud of him for that, and in an effort to always remember him, we started a scholarship for dual sport athletes. Jonathan was a basketball and soccer player, loved those sports, loved his teammates, and our initial response was to fund a scholarship, and it has been going strong now. We just awarded our third round of scholarships this past May. The other area that I wanted to do in his memory was to do something with dogs. All of Jonathan's life, he loved dogs, even with his allergies and how he'd blow up being around a dog. He didn't care. He'd rather come, spend time with the dog, then come home and take a shower. And so I always knew there was another mission under the Honor 25 umbrella to do something with dogs. And I just think, as I said in the parking lot, timing and everything has been serendipitous, that I had wanted to see how Camp Hill might benefit from a dog. And unbeknownst to me, the borough and the police department were already in contact with the school. So when I reached out to the superintendent and to Joe, the conversations with a facility dog were already underway, and I was more than happy to volunteer Honor 25 funds to underwrite the cost of the dog and to have continued ongoing fundraising that supports his needs going forward. And it just means so much that he will be not just a dog in the school, but a representative in the community, because Honor 25 is all about friendship, family, community, and teamsmanship. And I believe that this dog, this lovely Gibbs, just symbolizes that so beautifully for what's going on in the schools, how it will be of help to kids in the schools. It will just be a connection, and that connection can be connected back to Jonathan is such an honor. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I'm so sorry
saw his desire to connect with people, and for working service dogs, they have to ignore people. So for a dog like Gibbs, we were hoping to be able to find the perfect facility, and I think that Jonathan's story and Joe Capers and everybody involved came together, a higher power connecting us, and gave Gibbs the opportunity to be able to work with all the children and the faculty during difficult times at school, and be able to take some of that weight and stress off of all of them. So we're really honored to be a part of this team.
So Joe will be going to training next week, and then after that training's complete, he will come and Gibbs is coming home with you, right?
As long as Joe passes the
As long
test.
as you pass. And Detective Gibbs will be at National Night Out on August 2nd, so he'll be introduced to the community at that time. So thank you all, Elaine. Can't thank you enough.
No, I appreciate the opportunity and thrilled that Gibbs is part of the team.
Yeah, it's so cool. Thank you. See what else has Couple of
The
things.
mayor's part.
Just a couple things. Fire calls were ran 28 in the month of June, spent 64 hours. National Night Out is coming up on August 2nd, Tuesday night, 6 to 8 p.m. down at 24th Street, Lower Park. Also, just yesterday, Cumberland County rolled out a tax break or tax credit refund of some sort, up to $250 per firefighter EMT in Cumberland County, which is pretty cool. It's part of a recruitment and retention deal that they want to do. So now it's cumbersome, the paperwork's going to be for it. The application's not out yet for it, but we're going to take full advantage of that. Guys are throwing that out there here in town, so I think it's pretty cool. That's it.
Great, thank you. The only other things that I have is that we're going to have 2 action items under public safety. One is to appoint Officer Evan Ricker to our police department, and the second is to solidify the school resource officer MOU with the school district. So we'll be touching on that later. Any questions?
This is for the chief, I guess, regarding the officer appointment, and I apologize for not asking this in previous meetings because I know we've done other officer appointments, but can you speak to how our officers are vetted before they come before us for appointment?
There's a process that any candidate has to go through. They first have to take and pass the civil service exams, which include a written exam, an oral exam, and a physical performance exam. They then undergo a background investigation, which is pretty thorough. Certainly, it goes well beyond just a simple criminal history check and DMV check and those things. It involves actual home visits by our staff going to their home and visiting with them on site. The appointment tonight would be contingent, as it is with any officer, on successful completion of a medical and psychological exam, which is not only a good idea, but it's a state requirement, and we certainly adhere to that. So that, in a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you.
And are there any items in the MOU that are changing from the previous version, or is this really just the same document that we're renewing for another period of time?
Correct, this is a renewal of the document, and the school district has already approved the same document.
And it's
information. Next is Public Works.
Okay, we recently met, and before I forget, our next meeting will be scheduled for Thursday, August 11th, which is a change from the previously scheduled meeting. So Thursday, August 11th at 8 a.m. So if any of these issues are of importance or interest, please feel free to join us. First, also, I see one of our residents who attended our recent public works meeting had made some inquiries of some issues. I just wanted to convey that some of those our Public Works Director did address, either fielding them to PP&L or fielding them to our Codes Enforcement Officer. So if that resident has any further questions, Lester is not here this evening, but he would have that additional information regarding those issues that were brought before us. Regarding tonight's agenda, specifically the action item, before I turn it over to Mike to describe, it's regarding the sewer system rate study, and I just want to give some background and then turn over to Mike to talk about the scope and the project description. But it's come to our attention that essentially our sewer rates are not generating sufficient revenue to fund the operation and maintenance, including capital improvements of our sewer system. Our last sewer study was done in 2010. That suggested a significant increase at that time, but as a follow-up to that, the borough had only made a very modest increase, and it has not been adjusted since then. So just as as for informational purposes, that had proposed making or a total amount of $826 a year for a sewer user fee, and our current fee is only $636 annually. Moreover, in 2016, there was a base rate change from $165 to $159 for a resident, and that reduction was passed through to residents and was as a consequence or as a result of Hampton reducing its fees. So we have been advised by our finance director that perhaps we absolutely need to consider this so that we can continue to maintain our infrastructure. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike for further explanation.
Thanks, Jennifer. I won't go into the background any further. I think Jennifer kind of summarized what I wanted to present there. In order to complete the study, there are really two aspects to it. The first is to understand and forecast out for a period of about 5 years and maybe a 10-year horizon what the operation and maintenance costs are going to be, so sort of the day-to-day things like fuel costs and energy costs, the treatment costs from Hampton Township. And then the other side of it is capital improvements. So what are the infrastructure upgrades, replacements, those sorts of things that are going to be necessary to keep the system functioning properly for the next 5 or 10 years. So those are the two items that we would propose to calculate under the rate study. Lester has a very good sense of what the infrastructure needs are, so that helps reduce our effort a good bit. Part of that infrastructure as well is the I&I. We need to continue to work on preventing groundwater from seeping into the sewer system with projects like lining and selective pipe replacements. So the goal is to calculate both of those fees over the course of 5 years, do our best to predict things like inflation, which is very difficult to predict these days. Meet with Hampton Township, understand to the extent that they'll tell us what they intend to do with sewer rates over the next 5 years, and then bundle that all into a rate program that's fair and equitable. Currently, there are two user classes in Campbell Borough. There are residential and commercial, which we'll probably end up calling residential and non-residential to cover some institutional or industrial type uses. In accordance with state law, we need to make sure that the fees are uniform and equitable for all of the users and based on their demand in the system. So once we know the total cost, we intend to present a breakdown of how to spread that cost equitably among all the different users. That's really the nature of the study. We're requesting authorization tonight to do that study. Then, of course, we'll provide you with those calculations and those recommendations, and then council can consider how or when to implement them or to what extent to implement them.
And it would be subject to further public comment and consideration. And
The more that Jared and Lester give us and we don't have to do, the more we can bring that cost down. And preliminarily, it looks good. The guys are feeding us a lot of great information, so that they'll have to reduce our
Like, in our sewer system, like what percent, are we pretty tight now in terms of stormwater not leaking into our system? Or is that still kind of out there as a problem?
That's still an issue. It's something that we continue to work on. It's not uniformly spread across the entire borough. There are sort of areas that have more of an inflow and infiltration than others. We're working through a flow monitoring program where we put meters in manholes and figure out how much those meters spike in relation to a rain event. And then we can try and break it down and isolate where those hot spots are and put those out first with sort of selected projects. And then we go to secondary and tertiary kind of priority areas. So we're working on it. It's certainly still an existing problem, though, and there's work to be done yet.
And just one more thing, just before any additional questions. So we hope to have the study completed within 4 months,
Yes.
hopefully in the fall in time for consideration as we formulate the next budget. Moving on. Okay. Two more items for discussion before we move on to the presentation. For the purposes of council, I was working on this up until this afternoon, so that's why it's not included in the official packet. But the Public Works Committee has been revisiting a subject regarding converting our street lights over to LED lights. It was a topic previously considered by Public Works, and a few factors at that time had, caused the committee to decline the offer. But some things I think have changed, and I think we are willing and wanting to at least continue our investigation and learn more about the conversion. So before you is an FAQ that I drafted that has some questions that I think we as council might consider. So as far as what has changed, I think for our consideration is the annual savings have increased, so we are up to about over $6,700 in annual savings. We have late-breaking information of a potentially much higher number, but that we have to delve deeper into. But it's about $6,700 annually right now, so if it were to be a 15-year contract, we are potentially looking at $100,000+ savings. We would be converting our street lights at no cost to residents through and with PPL, upgrading at least 618 lights. They vary between Cobra Head style and NEMA style, and there are three traditional style lights. So we have a total of 16 lights, so that is what you would see in the borough packet. There's many benefits to upgrading to LED. Maintenance, brightness, reducing CO2 emissions in kilowatt hours. So as you may also recall, our Climate Action Task Force is working on a draft plan, and it proposes to offer a plan that suggests that the borough reduce its carbon output by 30% by 2033. Right? Yeah, I have it written down somewhere. Yeah. Oh, sorry, 2030. So doing this could also help the borough in some regard meet that goal. So it also talks about and regarding that, I think more importantly, the chair of our Climate Action Task Force, he is a professor at Shippensburg University in the Department of Geographic and Earth Sciences. And according to his calculation, this conversion of converting 618 streetlights from high sodium HPS lights to LED could reduce our annual energy consumption by 130,600 kilowatt hours annually. And additionally, it could reduce our American Medical Association and International Dark Sky Association does recommend that street lighting be at least 3,000 Kelvin or less. The current proposal before us, as we know now, PPL cannot provide 2,700 Kelvin street lights, but again, with the AMA and the dark sky, we consider the 3,000 Kelvin to be a friendly alternative. So there are some other considerations. Of course, our current saldo also indicates that we should not exceed both whether industrial, commercial, or residential not exceed 2,700, but I don't want that to necessarily be a hurdle or a barrier to us considering this. I think we can potentially, resolve that issue. But I think more importantly, and there's additional information on here, and of course this will be subject to change, but I think for the sake of just this very brief and initial conversation, it's just to get a general consensus whether or not this is something that we as a committee should continue to pursue. And more importantly, we do of course have some unanswered questions, but what questions, issues, if not now, but let us know by next month, what those questions may be and, what type of information you might need from us as a committee in the event that we bring this forward to council. I would finally say about this, that this, if we were to pursue this, it would require a resolution as well as us signing an agreement. So, with PPL. So, that is all I have on this particular topic right now. Any questions?
Say, by the time we decide to move ahead, assuming we do, is it a long process to get these switched over?
I don't think so, but that is one of our answer questions. I have seen varied information about how long it can take. It doesn't appear to be a necessarily long, drawn-out installation. Maybe a few months.
Thanks for doing this. It's a lot of details, though.
I just wanted to say I was not at our Public Works meeting in which this was discussed, and I was part of Public Works when we passed on this offer 2 years ago. And the reason being, they could not offer us a lower, dimmer Kelvin, softer color. Currently, our high-pressure sodium lights are approximately a 2200 Kelvin color, which is the more amber color that we're used to. It's a softer, color. The 3000 Kelvin is significantly brighter. I will say, because Jennifer mentioned the International Dark Sky Association, I saw that they just adopted new lighting principles in January of 2021, and they amended it in June 24 of 2021. And they are recommending to minimize negative environmental impacts. They recommend using lamps rated at 2200 Kelvin, which would be currently what our sodium, high pressure sodium lights are today. So as far as research, we do know that there are dimmable lights in production. We do know that there is, in my research, there is a leaning toward nothing higher than 2700. And my concern is that even if we do consider this offer, if we accept it, we are going to be dealing with the bright white light for many years down the road, even if PP&L gets a new inflow of lower lights, we're not going to get them changed out. I would also say, I think this would be a good thing to do, and I'm not sure when they're going to be installed, but I know that Mechanicsburg, it just passed a resolution to change out all of their lights. I had driven through Susquehanna Township, was it? Where Frank Lynch, our previous interim manager, lives. There's a bit of a glare, and it is an odd white jump into. I am not opposed to LED. I think it should be a good fit for our neighborhoods, for our environment, for migratory birds, for bugs. There is studies that indicate there are issues with these lights. So I had to put in my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. I just, I do want to note there are many municipalities through Commonwealth who have converted. There does not seem to be a one-stop shop to identify all of them, but, in my research, I can see that many different boroughs and townships have done this. Regarding the dimming comment, it is our understanding that PPL did not particularly dim these lights, but we have learned of a potential opportunity that we have to further research, offered by another utility company, that could potentially allow for remote dimming. So that may be something that could be an option in the future, and at what cost we still need to learn more. And just finally, regarding CALDA 2, I did notice on question number 12, and you can read it for yourself, that there is, of course, there is a difference of opinion, and one from which is the United States Department of Energy, and it does indicate that CCT, or the Kelvin or color temperature of the LED light, should not be a single determining factor in deciding whether or not you pursue and install an LED street light.
If I could just add, the 4,000 is concerning for me. What I read, about this was that communities that had switched to the 4,000 were very unhappy and many times paid at their own expense to go to 3,000 after they had had a free upgrade to the 4,000. So I hadn't realized that any of the lights were proposed to be 4,000. With all of this, I think that there's a lot of costs and benefits. Like, you need to weigh, you're saying that there's negative impacts of the light on, all of these, all of the wildlife, well, there's negative impacts of climate change on wildlife as well, and like the carbon emissions. So I think there's just a lot to weigh here, but I would need to see us jump. If there are other options, I know PPL is offering to do this for free, but if there are other ways that are better for us that include the ability to dim or to have the amber filtering that some of the communities use, I'd like to see us take some of the savings in electricity over the years and invest in getting it the way we want it.
Yeah, and one follow-up, as I was going through some of the communications that we have on this from PPL, and, I almost was under the impression before, maybe it still needs to be further clarified, that they would all be switched over to 3,000K. But then when I went back and I looked through, it said that they would be 4,000K on Main Street.
Right.
So that is definitely something that we need to further define. But also, I didn't talk about this, and maybe Mike can touch on this too. There's also a benefit in terms of maintenance and lifespan and life cycle of an LED light versus your traditional HPS. So.
That's true. They do have a much longer lifespan, and the entire industry is moving towards LED at a pretty rapid clip. I think to the point where in 10 or 20 years, it may not be possible to get parts to service high-pressure sodium lamps any longer. As the industry moves that way, there are more options becoming available, dimming, better reflectors, better colors. And it's really a judgment call as to when is the right time to pull the trigger and make the switch. But I think there are already sections of the lighting industry where LED is the only option. Like the big green highway signs you see that says take the exit for Campbell, LED is the only fixture made for those at this point. And I think within the span of, it's not going to happen tomorrow or next year, but in 10 years or 20 years, I think we may very well be there with street lighting as well.
I just wanted to share also, there's a community of Davis, and I think it's in California, that their electric company is, I don't know what it stands for, PG&E, whatever. But their community had specifically requested 2,700. PG&E said they couldn't provide anything less than 3,000, and now they're going to get it less than 3,000. So I'm just saying the capability is there, and I think it's important that we really make a decision that isn't going to be detrimental to our neighborhoods, which actually we can see the night sky with the lighting that we have now. This is significantly different, and well, 10 at my house anyway. So it's really, it's a significant decision.
But can we make the decision to do more research?
Yes.
And find more,
Yes.
find more options that might cost more, but give us LED lights that are warmer, not as bright, all of the things that we would like to see.
We will continue to do more research. That is the hope of the committee, and that's why we presented this. I think, we do have a photograph, and you can certainly do your own research. I just don't want the photograph to be the single thing, decision focus. I think there are other ways to look at luminosity and all that.
As a graphic designer.
But that was
I don't
supplied,
like-
it was supplied by P&L, the photograph.
I would much rather warm light in outdoor settings. I mean, I think, I hear exactly what Lonnie's saying, and I agree with her. Those cool light LED lights are terrible.
So we will continue to discuss.
Yeah.
Okay. And then lastly, not for a decision making tonight, but moving forward, because we intend to put it out for bid this fall. But also in your packet, we discussed at our last committee about what to put out for bid for our trash collection and recycling. So in the draft packet regarding the scope of work and then the alternate bids are on the back. The previous way in which the contract was bid, it had many different options. So we narrowed it down to 4 base bid options. The difference being is the size of the recycling cart and the frequency of the leaf waste collection. So there are 4 options. And then the scope of work also describes some of the changes that are highlighted in yellow, setting out a limit of 4 64-gallon containers, not to exceed 30 pounds for a 32-gallon bag, and then additional changes regarding the collection of bulky items, and to see whether or not we can reduce costs in any way for our residents if we were to change either both the leaf waste collection and or the collection of the bulky item. Trash a bag program would continue as it is now at the cost of residents. So on the back side of the F2, in the top bulleted information, I think we did not change any of that. I think that was a carryover from the prior contract. So I know Bonnie had inquired about whether or not the borough should bill or whether the trash collector, waste collector should bill. We did discuss it, and, you know, our finance director had indicated that because we bill currently, it's probably the best option to proceed that way. So, again, I guess if there are any other, you know, significant revisions that you think we should make to the bid form in regards to what we're asking them to advise us on, again, please do that, and we do have a little bit of time, as we don't intend to put it out to bid until this fall, and that new contract would start in April.
And if I could just clarify that, you know, we had been asked about recycling, both from people on council and even from the public, and the recycling is solely determined by what the county accepts. So Penn Waste or whatever municipal, you know, refuse collection service we use will only collect from us what the county is collecting, and the county will only collect what is, you know, what they're able to actually get rid of, right, once they collect it. So, you know, we did look into some additional recycling items, but it turns out that the county doesn't recycle those items.
Am I missing anything, Sarah?
We did also talk about the alleys. I
Oh, yes.
included the alley map that was in the last bid document. And this was bid in 2017 the last time, so we're going to look more closely at these alleys and see, as a practical matter with the current hauler, how is this working? Are they able to collect at the ends of the alleys, or are they not able to drop 2017, and then included in the extensions of the contract, these were the alleys they were to be able to drive down. So if you have any insight, you're familiar with those alleys, and you see the trash truck really can't get down there, we shouldn't have those in our contract, that you want to let us know as well.
So again, we will continue to discuss and accept any suggestions that you may have. And hopefully we can reduce costs, but I don't know if that will be possible, but that is hopefully our goal. And objective.
Thank you, Jen. Just a couple comments on the alleys real quick. Some of these alleys that where the community has to upkeep the alley, those trucks go down through those and make a rip up the alleys, is what I heard, so, and, yeah. So, just something else to think about.
I just looked at the alleys on that map. Those are all paved alleys, right? They're like the nicest alleys in Campbell.
well, we know of one particularly problem.
So there's one on there that is 18,
Oh, well, yeah.
but they just re-gravelled that. But
Well, as we know, the alleys has to be a partnership of
Right.
residents on that alley, and they don't always agree to the repaving of their alleys.
Right, yes, I hear that. The alleys is a conversation we could have for 3 days. I'm not sure.
Do we need to have that in there where they go down the alleys? Aren't the alleys, although the residences still have street front where they could?
Not necessarily. There's one particularly problematic area that is on the bypass.
Yeah.
So
That's-
maybe we
I
could
can
just
tell.
make
I
an
didn't see
exception
that
for
one.
that and then just keep them off the alleys
Lester,
anyway.
yeah, Lester is going to be reviewing the map and determining whether and where we need to make changes. Okay, and last but not least, we get to hear about the Conestoga Greenway.
Good evening, thanks. Real quickly, one comment on the lighting. We're part of the streetscape team at Gibson Thomas. You may recall we did the master plan, but more importantly, Sant'Angelo and Lindsay is part of that team. They're experts in lighting. You may recall the new lighting on Market Street is going to replace the Cobra heads that are there. So I would just suggest that they could give you expert advice about what you're discussing for probably not a lot of money, a couple hours of time, and maybe help you reach a decision. So you get that resource. I encourage you to use it. Thanks for your time tonight. This is an informational presentation. I'm going to be very brief. Next slide. The project committee, you can see them listed here. Sarah and Audrey have been working with us. You heard from Bob, who's on our committee, and Marilyn's here. So they've been loyal members, and we worked with them when we did your borough bike plan too. So you've got some great cyclists who have been involved for a lot of time here in Camp Hill. Next. This is prepared for the Cumberland County Collaborative, or Cumberland Conservation Collaborative, and the Friends of the Greenway. And it's also in partnership with Camp Hill and the 2 other municipalities. Next. We've been at this for about a year. Schedule's actually got extended. We're going to submit the final plan hopefully in September. We actually have a meeting here scheduled September 27th to present the final plan. We're going to be issuing the draft plan in a matter of days. So hopefully tonight's brief presentation will pique your interest and take the time to look through that. Next. Scope, I won't read this, but it's a fairly thorough, linear process we've gone through. And our goal is to get a system up and running. It may not be the ultimate system, but we think there's a good chance that you could get this up and running pretty quickly. One of the things in the report you'll see, there are going to be options for how this is done, but each municipality does it on their own, whether there's some kind of memorandum of understanding. So when you look at the draft plan, we really appreciate your comments on how you think that might work best. Next. Here's our mission and goals. I'll say that besides providing routes for walking and riding, we want safety is our really governing factor here. We use all the nationally accepted standards when we lay out these things, even at the concept level. We are very conscious about private property owners and respecting their properties. There's only a handful of properties where we need easements, and one in East Pennsboro, the gentleman who owns that property has already stepped up and offered to sell it to the township. So we're trying to get a system that we need only a minimal number of easements, and I think we've accomplished that with our draft plan. And also protecting the environment is very important with this plan. Next. We've done surveys and interactive wiki mapping. You can see some of the results here. A large number of the respondents think it's important to connect the Conneaut Greenway to existing area trails, and everyone certainly thinks that it's important to protect the environment as this is built. And I think if anything, this will enhance protection of the environment, because as people get out into areas maybe they haven't been out to before, they will see the resources out here and become stewards for those resources, hopefully over time. Next. So between our meetings, we've had 3 public meetings so far, where we've had either in person or virtually 208 attendees. We've had over 550 survey responses. We've had 150 wiki map responses, which is an interactive map. We've had a lot of public points of contact, so we've gotten a lot of good information, and I think we've gotten good feedback through the process. So I think we've done our homework with public interaction, and when we issue the draft plan, we expect more. Next. The context for this, of course, is your borough plan, and you can see Seabird Park, next slide, at the top there, right on the Conneaut. This is going to be your main connection to the Conneaut Greenway system, and you'll see how we're going to do that a little bit tonight. I'm not going to get into much detail at all, but we certainly think the plan will provide borough residents plenty of opportunities to connect to the greater Greenway system as the system comes up and running. Next. This is our project area with East Pennsboro, Hamden, and Camp Hill. And next slide. These are existing trails that are already in place, and you know, we were surprised to see so many. So that's great, because we're going to take advantage of as many of these as possible. Next. Then we look at Strava data. If you're a biker or a runner, you might have an app called Strava that tracks where you run or ride. And these are heat maps, so this shows where people are riding right now. Next. And then this shows where people are running. You can see in all the little peninsulas between the oxbows, a lot of people running on those streets because there's nowhere to get out, no way to get out. So we hope to give some ways for people to move beyond their little neighborhoods if they're running. Next. So how we started was we looked at all the possible routes that could possibly be put in place as part of the system. And then next, we came up with conceptual alignments based upon the feedback that we got. Next slide. We also tried to rank all those. We ranked them as easy to do. An existing trail obviously would be an easy one to make part of the system. One that's medium difficulty may have some grade issues, may have some right-of-way issues. Difficult may have more issues. And then the red is not likely to be pursued. And these might be extreme grade issues, or they might be areas where neighbors expressed strong disinterest in the trail. And again, our approach was not to go to those places, to try to get a system that we wouldn't lose the war for a couple of battles, and because we want to get a system in place. So that's how we rank those. If we go to the next slide, you can see how we rank those with the colors. In the next slide, we came up with a priority route system, which is in that purple color. And in addition to the primary routes, we're going to have secondary routes. And secondary routes is where we're going to make the strongest connections to Camp Hill. You can see over at Seabird Park, the primary route doesn't come down to that, but we have some secondary routes that do come down to it. And if we go to the next slide, I'll get to this, your connections in a minute. In terms of the metrics, you can see we've got about 12.5 miles of trail in this primary route system. Secondary routes aren't in here yet. Existing paved trails, we got 4 miles. Existing earthen trails that we're going to widen or improve, 1.6. We're only doing 0.3 miles of new trail. One of the comments from some people, oh, you're going to chase away wildlife. We're disturbing very little undeveloped land in the system, so that we're not going to have any type of significant effects to wildlife, people either, I think, or runoff and those types of things. And then on-road trails are 6.4 miles. And when you look at the draft report, you'll see what an on-road trail means. They're all on low-stress roads where Most of you would be happy to let your kids or grandkids ride on those roads. Low volume, low traffic roads that'll be signed for bike use. All roads are open for bike use mostly, except limited access highways. But these would be ones where you'd expect to see people next. So again, the draft alignment doesn't get down to Camp Hill, but if we go to the next slide, and this is the one. This is a sample of the detailed maps you're going to see in the report that are GIS, that are very detailed, they're very specific. And if you look down here, Seabrook Park is right here, coming across the Center Ave bridge. And so while the main route goes across and proposes to go across, you see number 37 and 38 with a new bridge, which is an expensive item. The secondary pass would come down across the Center Street Bridge on a protected multi-use trail, come down, loop around, and come under and go to Seabrook Park, and then also come up through these low-volume residential roads up Country Club Road to make the connection that way. So even though you don't have the primary route, this is just the way, don't get hurt. It's still a good route. This is the way we tried to design the system. And if we go to the next slide, you can see a photo sim of that protected multi-use trail looking on the bridge, looking towards Camp Hill. So you go across here, we cross back at the light that's behind me on this slide, and then you go down, make the left, and come under the bridge. So those are some of the details you'll see. Stormfest, the Friends of the Greenway are going to be having an exhibit at Stormfest, so they'll be there to make people aware of this and get people interested in looking at the draft next. So our cost estimates, the trail system itself is only about $4 million because we're using existing roads, etc. So there's not a big price tag for that. Your plan that we did a few years ago was, I think, $4.5 million just for the borough. So we think this is a good deal for the money in terms of what you can get up and running. The height numbers come in with the bridges. We have one bridge that I think we have to do at Ridley Park to get from, I guess it's the south side of the creek to the north side of the creek to get over to the Susquehanna. East Pennsboro, though, has a great track record. They're building a bridge across at Ricky Park right now, across Penn Street, I guess it is, that they're doing. So they're going to be bridge pros. So we think that's a doable one. The one that goes across Goose Island is very expensive, and we're doing that to avoid some private property owners who have expressed no interest in the trail. Who knows, in the future there may be a better alternative for that. And then there's another one up at Grandin Farms. So again, there'll be a detailed cost in this that you can look at next. And I think a big decision for all the municipalities is how best to move forward with this. Whether you do it individually, whether you do it, get 3 municipalities together and go to the funding agencies and say, this year we're going to do X, next year we're going to do this, and work together that way. That's something that the funding agencies really like to see, and we'll get you money quicker. So I would encourage you to consider that. Our next meeting, I mentioned, is September. It's going to be in person and virtual, so we hope that when the report comes out, I'm hoping within 10 days or so, you'll review it, give us your comments, and our contact information is there. Sarah, of course, has our contact information, and appreciate any feedback you have after you have a chance to review the report. And I think that's the last slide. Is there one more? That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? I'm trusting not, but just in case, I'll ask.
I got a quick question. When you're talking about like these secondary routes that are on existing roads, is it just envisioning like markings on the road? Like Country Club Road, for instance, would it just have like sharrows or whatever?
Correct, sharrows and signage. Okay. It's the same, it's also been proposed for Market Street as part of the streetscape. Great, thank you for your time.
Community Business Relations, Community Business and Government Relations. My turn. Okay. Downtown coordinator updates. We have a couple new businesses at 1801 Market Street. Saltzman Hughes, Sweet Velvet Macarons. If you guys haven't had those. They're so good. They're so good.
Cafe de Crave, which is going to be like, it's kind of like across from Roberto's. The farmer's market is going to start on August 2nd. There are lots of vendors. I think the number is between 9 and 15 at this point. It's a decent amount. And there's a ribbon cutting on August 3rd at Serenity Skincare and Wellness. And I think the rest of this, that's fine from that. Okay, so last month in our committee meeting, we put together a community events survey to hear from the community, and we've since sent it out to everyone in a variety of ways, and we got over 250 responses. It's been very interesting and enlightening, and Mercedes did some excellent graphs and charts that we will be going over at our meeting tomorrow. And hopefully that will help us with all of our community events going forward to do what everyone wants to see done in town. And we discussed, last month we discussed the MOU with DCHA for the upcoming year. And we're going to discuss it again this month, tomorrow, and then it will probably go to be approved next council meeting. And I have a couple action items tonight that are easement agreements for, they're all related to the Market Street Streetscape project. Sarah, are those the last?
These are the last easement agreements that we need for the project.
That is good news.
And you're taking them with you tonight. And you're recording them tomorrow.
This has been a long time that we've gone through to get all of those easements signed. So that's big, exciting news. And there is a community business and government relations meeting tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And happy birthday to my daughter. She is 13. 1 minute ago.
There we go.
All right, thank you. Okay, Parks and Rec.
All right, so the box lunch review has been very well attended. The next two events are scheduled for July 22nd and August 5th. Applications are now open for the Volunteer of the Year Award. You can find that on our borough website. So hopefully we get a lot of folks nominated. The Miracle on 24th Street Holiday Market Subcommittee is making great progress. We will be announcing the first wave of vendors that have been approved for the event in the next couple weeks, so we're very excited about that. And the Parks and Recreation, our next Parks and Recreation meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 25th at 4 o'clock.
Thank you, Mercedes. Planning and zoning.
Just to let you know, the planning and zoning minutes from our last meeting and the code enforcement report is in your packet, but I wanted to note that in the month of June, the borough construction projects totaled $1,230,188, which I thought seemed really large. But anyways, the next item on the topic, next topic on the list is Bee City USA. Last month I had provided a brief overview of Bee City USA to all of you, and its focus is to encourage communities to take actions to improve our native pollinators, which are currently in decline. So after our last council meeting, I followed up with everybody in an email that connected you to the Bee City USA website, just so you could review the program and we could have an educated discussion about that this month to see if we wanted to pursue participation in the program. I also asked Sarah to put documentation about it in this month's packet. So bottom line, if we want to pursue participation in the program, it would be predicated on having a resident-driven committee with related experience and interests to complete the commitments of the program. The commitments of the program include establishing a Bee City committee that would advocate for pollinators. Currently, pollinators are in decline, like by 40%. So there would be regular meetings scheduled, open to the public, so that residents would have the information and could be involved. But we would also need council or staff liaison to the committee. This group we would have to commit to creating or enhancing pollinator habitat on public or private land each year. We would have to commit to reducing use of pesticides by creating a pest management plan over the first few years. We would want to incorporate pollinator conscious practices into borough policies and plans. That could include working with stormwater mitigation plantings, Shade Tree Commission. We could work with them on pollinator-friendly trees, and working with Public Works on plantings in parks and such. We would want the committee also to host pollinator awareness events, and we would publicly acknowledge being a Bee City USA affiliate with signs and an online presence on our website. So we would provide a yearly report to Bee City USA on the previous year's activities as part of the renewal process. So the initial fee and the renew fees would be $100 a year based upon our population. So in determining whether we want to pursue resident interest, which I think is, the first thing we should do before we even determine if we want to move full forward on this, I thought I would bring attention to a couple of items that I think will help to determine the success of having a committee. So we definitely need to be considering the coordination with staff, with code enforcement. For example, like No May, we had brought that to our attention. I don't know if that was brought to the attention of council or just a committee meeting, I can't remember. What? Did we talk about it here? Okay. There would have to be coordination with Public Works, for example, if any borough land was utilized for creating pollinator habitats. And then the question would be, who would maintain the habitats in those larger public areas? And then would we, as a borough, be willing to budget any monies to assist the Bee City Committee initiatives and plantings? So those are two questions we need to answer. So I'll just leave that open for discussion if anybody has any comments, and then we can determine if we want to solicit interest from residents this next month, and then based upon feedback, we may want to sign up to be part of Bee City. At this point, there are very few communities in Pennsylvania that are part of this. I think we might just be the third if we decided to do that.
I was looking at it now, I was curious.
Yeah.
I don't see any Pennsylvania.
I had an
listed, but
article that I had sent out, I thought, and currently Media Borough is an affiliate, along with, let's see, well, it might be, along with Pine Grove Borough. So you could lead the effort if we decide to move forward.
I'll just comment. I think there's a lot of synergies with this bee program and a lot of the things we're trying to do here in the community. So it kind of seems like right now, not a lot of barriers to us doing this. But I do feel that community involvement is a critical success factor, because certainly there's only a limited amount of energy here and a lot of bees. I think I took a couple pictures of bees at Seabrook Park. So there are a couple bees out there, but there's only a couple. So I'm in favor of exploring it further.
I mean, everyone needs bees, right? We already have pollinator gardens in certain locations in the borough that we're already maintaining. So I think the whole point is that there are lots of things that are the criteria of this that aren't going to be more expensive, harder work. Like a lot of the things that are for pollinators are actually maybe less maintenance. You know what I mean? If you have wildflower gardens, you don't have to mow it, and that's less public works hours, right? I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. I'm 100,000% for Bee City USA.
I am as well, and I think that there will be resident, I would be surprised if there wasn't resident interest based on kind of seeing people's gardens, and like already I've seen a few signs about, you know, people promoting pollinators, like personal Bee City type signs in people's yards. I also think we should be moving, you know, we should have an integrated pest management plan that I think we probably, you know, do, where pesticides aren't our first line of defense to manage pests, that they're used, you know, when they're necessary. So I think it's important to note that integrated pest management plans don't rule out pesticides altogether, but they're conscious of the types of pesticides they're using, and they're using it as a last resort when other options have been explored and not worked. So I'm in favor of looking to see if there's resident interest.
Okay. Well, then I guess we will post on the website to see what the interest is. I would like to request people to submit what their interests and experiences are that would assist in this program if we move forward.
Yeah, I just have a question just regarding communicating about our soliciting for volunteers. When is the next newsletter deadline? Just passed.
Didn't miss it. I think, did she actually, yeah, it's at the printer now. Sorry.
Possibly get something together for Stormfest, a little.
Yeah, that would be a great idea.
With a QR code or something.
That is the one thing we are lacking at Stormfest. I couldn't get a beekeeper. So bring your own bees to Stormfest. But yes, that would be a great place to start promoting it. We could certainly, all of you, whether you like it or not, are going to be helping at the Burroughs station, and maybe you can promote, wear something with a bee on it, or I don't know. It's up to you. We have 2 weeks, but there's a lot you can do in 2 weeks.
Yeah, you can make a sign-up sheet, like the Bee City USA, and a sign-up sheet if you're interested in learning more or getting involved.
We'll figure something to put on the website.
That's awesome too.
Okay, so that was Bee City. Next, let's see. We have received final draft of the zoning ordinance, and that was included in your packet. It contains revisions made by our consultant, Charlie Schmiel, and it contains recent zoning changes approved by council, such as Act 50 and Part 8 regarding signs, all of which our legal team had incorporated into this document. So Charlie is here to provide a presentation on the changes that he worked on.
Thank you, Bonnie. Again, my name is Charlie Schmale with a firm from Bethlehem called Urban Research and Development Corporation. Is this microphone on? Okay. I should say it wasn't working very well. Does everybody have a copy of the 3-page summary that was in your packet? If not, I have some paper copies with me. It has Urban Research Development Corporation at the top. It says summary of proposed changes. We had the opportunity to work with mainly former members of council, and Bonnie and Alyssa and Lee as part of this process. It was delayed like most other items because of the pandemic, but there were a lot of meetings put into the proposed zoning ordinance, and a decision was made to break it into pieces. So the zoning map was the most policy-oriented parts, along with the proposed uses by zoning district. That was previously adopted. As Bonnie mentioned, the sign section was previously adopted. So what's mainly left is some of the more technical and administrative sections. They're a little less policy-oriented than what was already adopted. So
started this process was your existing ordinance was extremely wordy, unnecessarily wordy. I mean, the same sentence was repeated 50 times throughout the ordinance. It was just painful to read. I mean, your codes officer at the time felt very strongly about that. It was very hard to use. So one of the things that we try to do was just a good edit, just to bring it down to what words were necessary to get across the point that was being made. And if you look at the strikeout, a lot of the changes you'll see is just getting rid of extraneous words. So the next item was you adopted a new subdivision and land development ordinance. We had to make that consistent, make sure the definitions matched the landscaping provisions and lighting provisions meshed with that ordinance, which is a very good ordinance, by the way, the subdivision ordinance. I can say that because I didn't write it. The main provisions in the residential districts have not changed. They're the same lot sizes, the same setbacks, because they're well-established neighborhoods. The one change we did propose in this draft is in the downtown district, you're limited to a 35-foot height. That's very restrictive nowadays when you look at modern construction. And I believe the Smith Land project needed some variances because of that. So we suggested 45 feet or 3 stories. So you still have the 3-story limit, but we're giving people a little more room to have more higher quality interior design and higher quality exterior design by going a little bit taller in height. Things like giving a little more flexibility and impervious coverage in the shopping center district, and avoiding excessively dense townhouses. The townhouses, you don't have much land, but someone could do some redevelopment in some townhouse areas. The last item on the first page actually shouldn't be there. That actually is not a change. That was one mistake. I'll fix that. So I'm turning on the second page now. The biggest issue concerned 2 of the overlay districts. An overlay district is an additional set of provisions on certain land areas. So you have the regular zoning districts, and then you have some overlay districts with additional provisions. The Heritage District is mainly a historic demolition control district. The demolition compatibility overlay is mainly a way to make sure that new infill development fits in older neighborhoods. The problem was there was no map for either of them. So we are proposing a map. The committee spent a lot of time doing field work to prepare this map, and I believe there is a copy of that map in your packet. We looked at standards. One of the problems with the current ordinances is there's a lot of confusion between what was a regulation and what was a guideline. So we try to make that very clear. And also to update the standards on when a building should be considered for demolition. We're not saying that every old building must be preserved. We're saying that you have to show that there's a good reason for the demolition, and there's standards for the, I forget if it's Borough Council or the Zoning Hearing Board to make that decision on whether the demolition should be approved. There were some provisions that were overly complex. There was basically you had to do calculus to figure out a side yard setback in the development compatibility overlay, so we try to simplify some of those provisions. There's an emphasis on preserving front porches so they're not removed or enclosed on an older building. Next was parking. We look at your parking standards against the Institute of Transportation Engineering Research that's been done across the country, and did recommend some updating of some of the parking standards. One example is you had excessive parking required for non-medical offices. And that's become even more true now with all the telecommuting. The Zoning Hearing Board would be given the ability to reduce parking requirements if the applicant provides evidence that the parking would be excessive. And the Zoning Hearing Board also could reduce parking if it's necessary to have an adaptive reuse of an older building. We're finding
In a lot of communities, unfortunately, churches are closing, schools, parochial schools are closing, and they're convents, and they're looking for new uses for these buildings. And often they don't have enough parking to meet the full requirements, so there needs to be some modifications to make it work. Manufactured homes, which are mobile homes, we must allow them, and we've added some standards to make sure they fit in with the neighborhood. Federal law also requires every community to allow adult uses, which includes strip clubs. That's everybody's most interesting part of the zoning ordinance, is to read those sections. They're limited to the industrial district, and they're very strictly regulated. We propose some additional regulations, including limits on late night hours of operation. We had to address medical marijuana grower and processor provisions and dispensary provisions. The grower is limited to the industrial district, and there's large setbacks. We added a larger setback for crematoriums. We had to update the group home provisions because there's various emerging federal court decisions on that issue for persons with disabilities. We have a 3/4 of an acre provision for a church or place of worship in a residential district. That's intended to prevent a house in the middle of a block from becoming called a church. 5G antennas is a very important topic. There's a state law that pretty much requires every municipality to allow them within certain limits, and we've updated some of those standards in this draft. Wind turbines, they're limited to the industrial district. That's actually, I have shopping center listed, but they're not allowed in shopping center. They're limited to the industrial district, and the height is limited, and there's large setbacks. Restaurant drive-throughs, that's an issue that nobody's familiar with in Camp Hill, I don't think. 150-foot setback from a restaurant drive-through to a residential district border because of the noise and late night activities. Food trucks, we have additional provisions proposed for food trucks, mainly limits on late night operations and setbacks from houses. They have to be in a commercial property. And the last major policy issue was notice to the neighbors of zoning hearing board hearings. Right now, you require 200 feet of a notification to the property owners of when there's a zoning hearing board hearing. The committee felt that that should be increased to 300 feet for a special exception because that is something that typically has more impact on a wider area. So that's an overview of some of the changes that we've been working on with borough officials, and I'm here for any questions and comments you may have. I will be meeting with the Planning Commission next Tuesday, by the way.
Just something simple, what's considered late night?
Okay. If you bring up the issue of food trucks, I believe it is 9 p.m. unless the existing business has later hours. So if you have a food truck next to a microbrewery, which often happens, and the microbrewery is allowed to be open until 2 a.m. and the food truck will operate at 2 a.m. But otherwise, I believe it's 9 p.m.
How does the 150-foot setback from drive-through restaurants to residential districts, how does that relate to the high priority drive-through amendment that we already passed?
I may be mistaken that that was already in effect. I know it was done for restaurants in at least one district a couple years ago. Now it will be borough-wide. I forget if that previous amendment was already in effect or not.
I feel like we already adopted an amendment, so we should make sure that that amendment we already adopted is actually in this new version.
Yes, I'll triple check that. I may have just accidentally listed that as a new change when it's an old change.
Did you just say something saying about food trucks and where they can be?
Yes, food trucks would be allowed. I believe you have to have a commercial use on the property, so you can't put them on a vacant lot, you can't put them on a residential lot, certainly.
Are you talking about permanent food trucks there? You're not talking about special events, food trucks that come in?
Special events authorized by the borough is a different matter.
Right, okay.
And that's clarified in the draft. We're talking about a food truck that's there on a regular basis on the property.
All right, thank you. Thanks for that.
Anybody else? All right, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. So later on, under action, I will recommend that we send this on to the planning commission officially. Okay, so next on our list, in your packet you have the draft ordinance, or no, I guess it's the final ordinance, not draft anymore, prohibiting parking on the south side of the Market Street at 1801. And we had advertised that last month, so we will have a motion later on to approve that. And then in your packet is also a draft ordinance to amend the requirements for eating and drinking establishments. Because the borough has turned over responsibility for inspections and licensing of eating and drinking establishments to the Department of Agriculture, as a borough, we still need to process the permits, issue the permits, so that the establishments can actually operate in the borough. So the permit process will require that we have a record of their license from the Department of Agriculture, as well as an application for a permit to operate in the borough. So this ordinance details that process, and there will be fees associated with the permitting process, which will be discussed under finance. Any questions about that? Okay. And then finally, there's a draft ordinance for ordinance 187 in your packet, which is regarding the overhanging height of shade trees. We received a grant for a new borough leaf truck, which is taller than our old leaf truck. So our previous ordinance specified a 12-foot clearance, and this street truck will require a 14-foot clearance. So essentially, it's just a change of a number in the ordinance. So that 14 feet at street level must occur within 6 feet that extends from the curb to that 6 feet portion of the street. Okay, so I'll make a motion on that later. I think that's all I have under planning and zoning.
Okay, personnel policy and procedures, Michelle.
Okay, we have received and reviewed resumes for both Civil Service Commission and the Emergency Management Coordinator positions. And in the action part, I would like to recommend appointments.
Okay, my only question about this, and I know I have expressed a little bit of frustration about this before, and that is that appointments come before us and we do not know the name or the candidate. So, I will just say I find that unacceptable, that I'm being asked to vote on something and I do not know the names of the people who are.
Right.
I second that thought.
So I will accept it tonight, but this hopefully will be the last time I have to say it, and I hope that we can continue to resolve that, so that we can be informed.
I think we were possibly making the decision for one at the very last minute, but I thought that we had moved to including the resume of the person the committee was recommending in the packet. So that didn't happen this time, but that was
resume of the emergency management coordinator. I thought everyone had received that before. Okay.
So do we delay then this process of appointing these folks?
No, I'm just asking for
Yeah.
commitment that we continue to be mindful of that going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, I understand that.
Would it make sense to, maybe just, I think there's no problem with introducing the names at this point, right? Like, who we're gonna recommend so that people can ask any questions.
Yeah, do I need this on? One was for civil service is Tim Jackson. And do I even mention the other? Or do you?
We can mention the other one, or Bonnie, go ahead.
Bonnie, go ahead.
So the other candidate for the emergency management coordinator is Robert Forbes.
Relation.
Yes, and we are very appreciative. We have been searching for an emergency management coordinator. It's a very, has a lot of requirements of trainings and it's a time commitment, and we really need somebody in this role so that we can be prepared should there be something that, something that we need to manage. So we're grateful that Robert Forbes was willing to apply for this position. And we can certainly share the resumes with all of council meeting after.
So I guess to just closing then, like I similarly asked earlier then, what is the vetting process for these appointments?
Well, I'd say that we go over the requirements or lack of requirements with the resume of the people that have applied and their interest. And I don't.
We make recommendations. Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of these commissions, and I'm not talking about civil service commission, but just the commissions and boards, et cetera, we often don't have an abundance of candidates. And really the main requirement for a lot of these positions is that the person be engaged and committed to, volunteering their time and showing up, and being a good, member of the community. So.
I was going to say, we also interview them, or I have interviewed and contacted them and, questioned them about their interest and that they understand what it involves.
Who interviewed Mr. Forbes?
Did you?
I did, yeah.
I did too, and I'm
We only had one.
I'm really
We only had one
talking,
candidate.
but no, I wasn't.
We did all review his resume, and he has extensive management experience with the military for multiple, decades as a career military member. So we think that his management experience will be ideal for this particular position. But again,
As of the end of June, there's a brief description of some highlights that are included in the report. This evening, when we get to the action part of the agenda, there'll be 3 actions that we'll be looking at. Approval of bills, consideration to amend our utility bill collection policy to move the time frame when consumers are sent to collections from 6 quarters to 3 quarters. This will be effective when the 3rd quarter 2022 bills become due. There's a lot of discovery that was done, and we found that this is more in line with what other communities do in terms of folks who are late. We feel that shortening this up will make us get the payments in more promptly. We do have a lot of outstanding bills right now. And then the last piece, when we get to the action part of our agenda, we will consider to amend the fee schedule to include these restaurant registrations that Bonnie mentioned. So that's forthcoming. I don't know if anyone had any comments. There is a lot of little notes around some of the bills we're paying, but given the length of our meeting, we're not going to enumerate all of those. But there are some interesting points. But so I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions.
I have one question on the budget to actual, the percentage of budget. When we say like percentage of the budget, are we talking the annual budget, or are we talking like the budget as of this time of year? Like, do we
The annual percentage, so as of 6/30, about 50% through the year, we should have, if nothing cyclical, we should have about 50% of the budget.
Okay, our school district liaison,
There's no new updates. I am going to write a brief summary of our second quarter highlights to, just like a little letter to them like I did for the first quarter, but we will be getting back together in September.
thank you, Sharon. Stormwater Authority liaison.
Okay, so we held the Stormwater Authority meeting yesterday morning. 3 items of note. The televising of the stormwater system began this past month. So if you're interested where they are working, the borough website will have their schedule posted. The 25th Street project is completed. Just a note regarding the paving that was done there. Just a base surface coating of paving was done on one lane where the digging had been done. And the plan is that the entire street will be paved as part of the street paving schedule next year. Okay. And then finally, the 21st Street project is completed, except that the crosswalks have to be painted there. So that street's open, right? I haven't been on it.
It is, it's open, we haven't seen the first big storm yet, but are confident that it's gonna.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, we haven't
That's how
heard
good
much
it
about
was.
it, so. It all just disappeared. That project still has a little paperwork to do. We're gonna do an inspection, and generate a punch list on Tuesday, and I think that'll be closed out in August.
That's it for me.
Library board liaison.
Okay. So the Frederickson Library is putting a link on all their social media. They're looking for feedback on their strategic plan. So they're asking people to, fill it out and share it, and so they know what they're going to do in the future. And July 21st, which is next Thursday, continues their concert on the lawn with Shay Quinn and friends, and that's at 7 o'clock p.m. That's it.
And Capital Region Council of Government liaisons.
Okay, 2 events that the Capital Region Council of Governments will be holding. One is an auction that will be held on July 20th at Fair Oaks School in Carlisle. There will be food trucks, and a notary will be on site. They will be selling cars, trucks, vehicles of all types, office equipment, supplies, appliances, and tools, computers, furniture, instruments, flat screen monitors, and bicycles. So this is a collection of items that are for sale from other municipalities.
Can you repeat what the title of this is, if we want to look it up?
It
Sounds
is-
interesting.
It is the Capital Region Council of Governments Auction. COG is their abbreviation. So that's July 20th. The next item, they will be hosting at Armitage Golf Course a picnic and tournament on September 19th, and that is open to the public. Mark informed you about the tax credit for volunteers, fire, EMS and firefighter volunteers that the county is providing or has approved. And just one more note, the county, this was noted at the meeting, the county has retained its AAA bond rating, so that's a good thing. And I think that is it.
Thank you. So, we've reached our second period of public comment. If you have a public comment to share related specifically to the action, the pending action items, we invite you to come up to the microphone and state your name, your address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on then to new business. First is public safety.
Great, thank you. I would like to move to appoint Officer Evan Ricker effective August 15, 2022, contingent on the medical and psychological assessment.
Oh, okay.
It's a typo.
like to move to appoint Officer Evan Ricker effective August 15, 2022, contingent on the medical and psychological assessment.
There's a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries.
And the second one, I would like to move to renew the School Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with Camp Hill School District.
I'll second it.
There's been a motion and a second to renew the School Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Mercedes. Public Works.
I move that we approve the agreement with HRG to perform the sewer system rate study on an hourly basis in the approximate amount of $12,400.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve the agreement with HRG to perform the sewer rate study. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion passes. And Community Business and Government Relations.
I move to approve traffic signal easement agreement with Lamont Group LLC for the property located at 2026 Market Street, tax parcel number 01210271-404.
Second. Thank you. There's been a motion and a second to approve this traffic signal easement with Lamont Group. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I move to approve sidewalk and traffic signal easement agreements with 2101 Market Street Association LLC for the property located at 2101 Market Street, tax parcel number 01210271-425.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to approve the sidewalk and traffic signal easement agreement at 2101 Market Street Associates LLC. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes. Next.
I move to approve sidewalk easement agreement with Ray Harbor for the property located at 2502 Market Street, tax parcel number 01210271-334.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve sidewalk easement agreement with Ray Harbor. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. And so, we did not have to, we advertised ordinance for taking the property, and we were able to get all of the easements, so we will not need to do anything with that.
Good job,
Yes. Thank you, Sarah.
Good job, Sarah.
And Julie.
And thanks to the property owners.
And all of the property
Yes.
owners, yes, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, planning and zoning.
I'd like to make a motion to forward the final revised zoning ordinance to the Borough Planning Commission.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Just, can you remind me, so we sent the draft version to the county planning commission?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're
So-
gonna just let the Planning Commission
Do it
review this first.
We sent the draft to the Borough Council Planning Commission last month.
Well,
each
like
had
2 weeks
drafts.
ago.
2 weeks ago.
We have drafts, but now we're only forwarding the final right now to our planning commission and not yet.
This is
Right.
still a draft.
It's still a draft, but
Just
this
to
is
get
like
more
an
time to read it.
official, it's an official,
On your end.
yeah.
I guess we
To
should
provide.
say final revise.
Okay, so there's been a motion and a second to forward that final, was there a second? There was, right?
Yes.
Okay. To forward the final revised zoning ordinance to the Borough Planning Commission. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 2022-4 to prohibit parking on the south side of Market Street at 1801 Market Street.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 2022-4. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
And I'd like to make a motion to advertise the ordinance to revise regulations relating to eating and drinking establishment registration for consideration on August 10th.
Is that our next monthly meeting?
Is it? I think so.
Is it?
So there's been a motion and a second to advertise the ordinance to revise the regulations relating to eating and drinking. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
And I'd like to make a motion to advertise the ordinance amending section 187 for consideration on August 10th.
A motion has been made and it's seconded to advertise the ordinance amending section 187. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. All right. Personnel, policy, and procedures.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Tim Jackson to the Civil Service Commissioner position with his term to end on December 31st, 2025.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to appoint Tim Jackson as Civil Service Commissioner with a term to end 12/31/25. Any discussion?
Yes, I don't want to belabor this, but can you describe what the position is, and can you describe why this candidate is appropriate for this position?
I mean, would you like to talk about this? Could either of you talk about the Civil Service Commission? I can pull up the document I've read over, but thank you.
Sure. We,
Thank you.
the borough has a civil service, pursuant to state law, we have to have a civil service commission that they have previously adopted rules and regulations regarding the testing, the hiring, the possible discipline, up to termination of police officers, and it is required by state borough code, and it is a 3-member commission appointed by council, and they usually don't have to do too much too often. It's when we test and then they certify the list of eligible candidates is their primary role. And they would hear any appeals by candidates who want to appeal their score or their status on the civil service list.
And then I think your second part was related to perhaps Tim Jackson.
Why is he being nominated?
Well, he applied, and we're nominating him. I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying. He applied, and I think in part one of the reasons I personally thought he was a good candidate is that he's taken a lot of interest in the policing in Camp Hill and has been involved in conversations with the chief and others about the way in which policing works and best practices. And I
As well as the interest in the Human Relations Commission.
yes.
Well, he sounds like a good candidate. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, sorry, I forgot where we are. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. And then Bonnie?
Oh, yes. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Robert Forbes as the Emergency Management Coordinator.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to appoint Robert Forbes as the Emergency Management Coordinator. Any discussion?
Does that have a term or no term?
It's, I believe it's really no term, but we appoint annually, so it's an annual term, I guess, essentially, but typically, typically there's so much training involved that I wouldn't imagine anyone would just do it for 1 year unless they moved. But we do appoint it annually.
So this is a pretty important position for the borough. So this is the person that if we end up in an emergency, state of emergency, they would then be responsible for coordinating our activities.
Very extensive training.
Yeah, I think I heard about this. And said candidate is open to completing all this training within a certain time frame? Okay, terrific.
And they are retired, which is, have the time to do the necessary trainings. There's a minimum training requirement, but then there's also lots of additional training that the candidate, that the person in the position can pursue if they have the time and interest to do so. And so it's great that Robert will have that time. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to appoint him. We've had conversation. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And abstentions?
Me. I abstain.
Thank you. Okay, so that motion carries. We have an emergency management coordinator. Finance.
All right, perfect, you guys. We have a few motions here. First, I make a motion to approve a utility bill collection policy to forward delinquent payers to collections after 3 quarters of non-payment.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve a utility bill collection policy. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, next I make a motion to approve resolution 2022-10 to amend the fee schedule relating to the permits for eating and drinking establishments.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2022-10 to amend the fee schedule. Any discussion?
Sherry, did you mention the fees specifically? I know you highlighted that we're doing it.
Yeah, it's going to be $35 for the first year for folks, then $25 subsequently, just to cover the cost of the paperwork, the administrative piece.
I think food trucks may be
I think food trucks are 25. Yeah, I think that sounds right.
For the year, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
I missed this up front, but okay. I make a motion to approve a contribution to the Lion Foundation in the amount of $3,500.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the contribution to the Lion Foundation in the amount of $3,500.
Question, is this something we do every year? Is this
I'm not going to be
something-
able to answer. Is that something we do annually?
Okay.
We have it budgeted.
We have a budget, yes.
Okay, great.
Can you remind me though, how is that particular number determined? I knew there was a letter in here, but
They're making a request for $3,500 for something specific. We have budgeted $6,000 every year for the Lion Foundation and $6,000 every year for the library.
So I'm not
$3,500 come in.
Right, I'm not sure why they request 3,500, so I am gonna check that with them.
And is this the same amount that's been requested then in recent years? So is it?
Typically, they've always requested the $6,000. So
Which is
maybe
why
they
we
have,
budgeted for it.
maybe they, yeah, which is why we budgeted for
So I said, I'll just put this through and I don't.
They have a specific need right now.
They have a new.
What was it for?
They have a new executive
The,
director.
Yeah.
there's a letter in your.
There's a letter in here saying specifically what the $3,500 is for.
Junior achievement,
Oh, right.
yes.
Do we anticipate them coming back then later with the second request?
They did not say, I can ask that. Right, so if anybody knows them, I mean, the whole thing went really fast. So I'm not sure why they didn't ask for the full amount, and I forgot to even check what they asked for last year. We have, historically, I do know that we have asked them to request the amount as opposed to us just giving it to them. So maybe they don't need as much this year, but I will check on that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to make that contribution. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, last but not least, the big one, I make a motion to approve the payment of checks in the amount of $870,097.38.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to pay the bills. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Huh, good job, guys. This was a large agenda and lengthy agenda, and it is 9 o'clock, and we have come to our third period of public comment, which is open to any comments. So if you have anything to offer, please come up to the microphone, state your name, your address. Sure.
Bruce Bigelow, 20 South 26th Street. I won't be keep you long, but it's 9 o'clock already. Just two observations. First of all, the Lion Foundation has a new executive director this year, Kelly Falk, and this might be part of her new regime, how she's going to specifically request things. The second thing, Ms. Benz indicated that she was surprised at $1.2 million in construction permits, but I noticed in your packet, 908,000 of that was for one project. I don't know what it was, but that was the majority of that.
Thank you.
That was for, what was it?
That was for the borough's pump station.
Oh.
We gave her our permits.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Exciting stuff, that's funny.
I feel like we shouldn't have to give ourselves permits.
That was free.
Yeah,
It's free.
We don't pay the cost of the application, but it still has to be documented, inspected.
Well, good for us for doing all that construction. Any other,
It's a little joke at the meeting.
any other comments? Thank you, Chris. Okay. Well, with that, it's time for closing remarks by council. I'll start down here this time. Sherry.
Okay, terrific. First and foremost, thank you guys for hanging in here. We really appreciate having some folks keeping an eye on things around here. I do want to just have a note of appreciation for Sarah's efforts around the Storm Fest. I'm so excited and I'm so bummed I'm going to be on vacation. So I wish you all the best, guys. It's going to be awesome.
Would it be possible, Sarah, to include something about the lantern flies at Stormfest? I know it's like vaguely, I'm kind of last minute, but I mean, it's a pretty serious problem and,
They can talk about that at the Shade Tree Commission table.
okay,
They do talk about that at Shade Tree.
okay, great, and just how the community can,
Right.
you know,
I
help.
mean, there's no easy solutions, but,
And a social media campaign maybe? To get the eggs. Yeah, to show people how to, help the residents.
It's the tape around the tree, so I know that the county was or is making that available. I didn't know if that's something they.
They haven't told us if they are, I don't know.
We'll look into ways to spread awareness about the lantern flies.
Yeah, I agree that if we could just get the word out that it's something we should be fighting.
It's the eggs that you have to go after. It's great when you put them in.
The unfortunate aspect of the tape is that birds and, I don't know about squirrels, but other animals can get stuck in it, so there is a new trap that is available. I'm not quite sure how it works, but.
You can make, I don't know if homeopathic is the right word, but you can mix Dawn and water and spray it and it's.
You can make a trap. We'll continue having, yes, we will continue having discussions. Michelle, do you have any closing remarks?
I know I never do, but I really just want to say how much I appreciate everybody, and it's all of us, and you guys over there for all of the work that you're doing. I'm really impressed with how everybody just works, you know what I mean? And I really like the community engagement, and that you guys email us and show up and are part of all this. So thank you very much.
No comment. I agree with everything stated.
Jennifer? There's a community and business relations meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. Feel free to stop by if you're bored. It's going to be thrilling. We're going to find out what all the community members have said about what they want events to look like. It's going to be fun. Also, happy birthday to my daughter again. Hopefully I'll get home before her bedtime. I think you will, because with that, I have no remarks. Is there a motion to adjourn? Meeting is adjourned at 9:02 or 9:03.